Newspapers have been around for hundreds of years. Magazines have been around for over 100 years. And somehow we think that podcasting is mature, and it's not. It is still an immature baby. There is so much room for growth. There's so much change taking place. And I think that's really what I'm excited about, is being here at the ground floor, continuing to do what I do, but embracing the growth and the change and the development as it comes.
Welcome to PodBiz, the money behind the mic, where we get into the business of podcasting. I'm Norma Jean Belenke, a podcast and media strategist, specializing in marketing and audience development.
And I'm John Kiernan. I'm a podcast producer, and we're asking the question that's on everyone's mind. Where is the money in podcasting?
Each week, we talk to podcast industry professionals, marketers, and creators who are turning podcasts into a thriving business and making the industry what it is today.
With real revenue, real strategies, and real results.
If you're looking to grow or scale your show, and of course monetize, you're in the right place.
So let's get down to PodBiz.
Today we're joined by Victoria King Meyer, president of Progressio Global and host of the Chemical Show podcast. Let's get down to PodBiz. Hi, Victoria. How's it going?
It's going great.
Well, let's get straight into it.
Yeah.
Where's the money in podcasting?
The riches are in the niches, or in other words, the riches are in the niches. I'm a big believer of that, and I've really seen this to be true, right? So the Chemical Show is absolutely a niche B2B podcast.
Yeah.
Serving the chemical industry. And in many ways, the chemical industry is a $1 trillion industry. My podcast is frankly a broad topic. We're going to be rolling out some actually much more targeted industry-specific podcasts. So if you don't know, and for people that don't know, everything around you is a chemical product. The paint on your walls.
Absolutely.
The soap that you wash your hands with, all that stuff. So it is a giant industry with a lot of products and product lines, et cetera. So you ask me, where's the money? And the money is in the niches. I'm a big believer that podcasting is such a great form of storytelling, and across actually business mediums. And I focus in on business leaders, business topics, business podcasts. They are looking for opportunities to share their story, get more personal with people. And in doing so, they recognize the value. And so the value comes through paid interviews, advertising, email advertising, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, when we're talking about podcasting, that's not about podcasting. It's definitely about making sure that you're clear on who your podcast is for and providing the maximum amount of value. Now, when we're talking about a specific industry, right, like the chemical industry, like you said, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry, right? Everything from the paint on your walls to the soap in your bathroom to shampoo to toothpaste to, so many products, right? The oil that goes in your car. And it's definitely something where, where it's an invisible industry, but it is prevalent in almost every facet of our day-to-day lives. So I think that that's one of those great examples of being able to really maximize your impact within an industry that you already have experience in, doing something, number one, that you love, and number two, that provides value to that industry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when I started podcasting, I wasn't sure what my topic was going to be. In fact, this was the thing. I'm like, oh, I need a podcast. And everybody says to niche down, niche down, niche down. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how niche I can get. And I was out for a walk one day listening to a podcast. I wish I knew what podcast it was, because I really owe that podcaster a lot. But I'm out for a walk and I realized, I'm like, the Chemical Show. Just keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple.
And I was actually on a goal-setting retreat with my husband. I was out on this walk. I got back to our hotel room. I immediately looked up the website. It was available, and I bought it. 3 days later, I was talking to my business coach, and I was talking about this, and he's like, would you like me to introduce you to my podcasting firm? I'm like, yes. And so sometimes the stars align, but it's also frankly, just getting an idea and make it happen.
Absolutely. And I think we'll talk about your journey in a little bit, within the chemical industry and your engineering background and all of that. But it's definitely something where sometimes things that we have expertise in can come in handy in super valuable ways down the track that we don't necessarily expect, right? And so, having that expertise in a professional setting within the chemical industry, right?
Yeah.
I just keep thinking in my brain, Vicks, right? No one is sponsoring us right now, unless, Vicks, you want to write us a check. But at the same time, like it's one of those industries that, especially within the United States, it's so prevalent and industrial and commercial, but you're not necessarily seeing the names of the big players, on your shelf every time you go to the grocery store. So
Right.
that kind of brand awareness, that kind of storytelling, right, is so much more important. And I think that, when you're looking at having an industry podcast for anybody out there, who's like, okay, I'm a doctor or I'm a dentist or I'm a chemical engineer or I work, in the dairy industry, whatever it is, you can utilize that expertise and it has tremendous value when you apply it to other aspects of business that can benefit that main industry, right? It's so important. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you've really created a fantastic podcast with The Chemical Show. Props to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun because it's also one of those things where it's like like you said, it's not that complicated. Another podcast I love, in STEM is on DNA and it's called DNA Today, right? So it's
Very straightforward.
with Kira Deneen. And I think with things like that, it's super important to not be, like you said, it's important to really go hard on your niche, but not to get too technical about it, right? Because you want to hit everybody in that genre because there's going to be an episode for everybody in that genre. And as, the show becomes more and more listened to, right? As it becomes more and more popular, people from all around that niche, from every tangential corner of that niche are going to be like, oh, Chemical Show, done, right?
Absolutely.
So very, very smart there. And tell us a little bit about, how you got into the podcasting industry because you have a very unique journey.
Yeah.
You're a STEM girly.
I am a STEM girl, chemical engineer with an MBA. I have spent my career in the chemical industry, the first 25 years in big corporate, Shell, Clariant, LyondellBasell, so publicly listed companies, big names, manufacturing, business development, all kinds of roles. And in 2017, I launched my own consulting business, Progressio Global, which I still run today and do strategic advisory work and coaching and executive coaching across leaders in the chemical industry in and adjacent to. And it was during that time frame when I was growing my consulting business that I, first of all, got introduced to podcasting because the reality is I had no idea what a podcast was. I remember asking my brother-in-law one time when we were on a family vacation and he lives in Chicago and he takes the train to work every day. And this was probably, I don't know, probably around 2017, 2018. I said, well, what do you do when you're on the train? He's like, I listen to a sports podcast. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, there's this daily sports podcast I listen to. I'm like thinking, you are insane. Like, who does that?
Yeah.
Well, apparently me. I got introduced to podcasting and really, I love podcasting from the perspective of not just entertainment. I'm really much more about personal development, business development, gaining skills, gaining ideas, learning about stuff. For me, podcasting is a lot about learning. And I realized along the way that there was no podcast out there for chemicals. There's a few, but I was running short of podcasts to listen to. So that's one. As a consultant, they always tell you to build authority. And one of the ways you do that is by writing articles, by getting visible. And podcasting is a growing way to do that. And so I was like, okay, I could do a podcast. And frankly, in many ways, I can channel my inner Oprah Winfrey. And so
gosh, don't we all just want to be Oprah a little bit? Like, I have to say, I don't know if it's like, because we're American or, like women from, I don't know, maybe now like 25, 30 to like 60, 70. We all want to be Oprah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
I kind of grew up with Oprah as a young adult, right? Like she was it, but it's just talk radio. I thought about having a talk radio show. I thought, I'm like, how do I do this? How do I do this? And the reality is the power of a microphone, a computer, a phone, whatever. And actually, you get to have your own talk radio show. It's called a podcast. So shortening this up, I started thinking about what would that podcast be. And as I told you, this fateful goal-setting retreat in 2020, I was out with my husband and I was out for a walk and it just came to me that I'm like, keep it simple. The Chemical Show, just make it happen. Did that 3 days later. My business coach said, hey, I have a all-in-one service that I use. Are you interested? Yes. So shortly thereafter, it took me about 6 months to get it launched. So from November of 2020, when I really landed and just said, this is where I'm going, to April of 2021, when the Chemical Show launched, it was putting it together. And I knew, so there was a couple premises that I knew when I started. I knew I wanted it to be very conversational. I recognized that traditional media has actually a very narrow coverage of chemical.
Oh, yeah,
And
totally.
and there's certain leaders who are amazing leaders, but they are for the biggest Fortune 50 global companies, and they are the only ones that ever
Yeah.
seem to get airtime. And what I knew from my own experience, my experience coaching and advising people, was that people crave insights and connections. They want to know, well, how are other leaders approaching this? What is this company
Absolutely.
doing, et cetera? I mean, I get those questions all the time, even today, like, what are you hearing? Well, okay, let me tell you what I'm hearing. Go listen to the podcast. There it
Yeah.
is. So I launched 2021. The first person I invited to be on the podcast, Brad Beauchamp, who's the CEO of Carpenter Corporation, said yes. I didn't know what I was doing. I thankfully prepped a few questions, and I needed those, but I was like, I talk to people all the time. I don't need to
I can talk
prepare.
about anything with anyone at any time. I know what
Absolutely.
I'm doing. I'm Oprah.
Until the camera's running, and then you're like, oh, thankfully I had those questions.
So glad I did prep. Yeah.
Absolutely. Brad introduced me to 10 of the first 20 guests that I had on the podcast. He was super generous and starting that. And so the Chemical Show was launched. And I always knew it really was a business mechanism. So
Yeah.
for me, it wasn't just, if a tree falls in the woods, will anyone hear it? I don't know. If you produce a podcast and don't tell anybody, will anybody hear it? No.
Oh gosh, isn't that I talk to my clients about this all the time. I'm like, you can make beautiful work, but if you don't tell anybody about it, if you don't have a trailer, if you don't share the story of your story, it's so important. I mean, like this is what I do with clients, right? In terms of strategy and building out a launch runway and, the tone and the brand and how you want to market it. And, I think it's something where, like, first of all, good work does, stand on its own. And also you have to tell people about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I knew that it needed to be marketed. And frankly, we do all organic marketing at this
Yeah.
point. At some point, this year may be the year that I actually invest in like paid marketing in organic growth, because I think we're at the point where we need to, just to get to the next level. But social LinkedIn is where my clients are and my audience is. So
Absolutely.
LinkedIn, email list. We dabble a little bit in Instagram and Twitter, and I don't know, it's there.
No, but you know where they are, right? You're like, I know
Yeah.
that, this is a B2B show, and my
Yeah.
clients and the people who I want to reach and my desired audience, they live on LinkedIn. I mean, Podbiz, we live on LinkedIn, right? We love LinkedIn. We love YouTube, because I don't necessarily think a B2B podcast on podcast monetization is going to really hit on Instagram.
No. I mean, you might find somebody. However, that's not where it is. So LinkedIn is the place. LinkedIn is our go-to platform. And so, part of the formula for success for me was really good guests. And so always trying to get good guests at good companies that people want to listen to. Making sure that we're telling a story. This is not an advertorial. Even today, where a lot of my interviews are paid executive interviews, I am crystal clear. This is not an advertorial for you.
Right. This is not celebratory. We're here to actually have a conversation.
Exactly. We're having a conversation. We're sharing your story. People are going to love hearing about you and your company and your innovation. And that's what generates interest.
Absolutely. And people want to hear the human parts of your journey, right? Like everybody's had career pivots where, maybe they weren't the most inspired in a role, or, maybe a company ran out of runway. They were a startup and they had to pivot. Like, you never know, right? And so I think that it's really inspiring sometimes to hear somebody who is where you want to be and wasn't always.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's been, so 4 years in, 220 plus episodes, launched in 2021. In 2022, I launched a community. It still drags along. Community building is really stinking hard. So
It is.
rather than having a community that's in a really defined online space, which we do have the chemical community online, I recognize that the community is when I go out to conferences and meet people. In
Yes.
2023, we launched our own conference, the Chemical Summit. And that has
Fabulous.
been a great journey and experience, creating community building, creating connection, bringing great content and insights to people.
I think there's just a couple of things you said I want to expand upon. The first is you have this knowledge base, right? You've been a chemical engineer. You're a STEM girl. And at the same time, you found a new obsession like we all do. I think everybody I have ever met, when they discover podcasting, it's like, ding, the light goes on, and then you just binge everything. It's like, finally,
Absolutely.
you have an appetite, and you're at a buffet, and you just can't stop yourself. And I think we're all guilty of that. I think that's also, something where when that happens and you reach that limit of, hey, what I want doesn't actually exist, one of several things happens. And the most successful people say, actually, I'm going to create it. How do I create the thing I want? Because it's not here. I've looked around. I'd love for this to exist, and it doesn't. So how do I create it? Because I want it. And so I know other people want it. And how do I provide that value? Because it's valuable to me, and I see the value.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you are so right about that. I think, and there's so many resources, and sometimes I just think, just do it, right? The whole Nike.
I mean, there's a different, the difference between doing it and not doing it is like, it could be mindset, it could be budget, it could be all these things. And at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to do it, right? And podcasting is one of those mediums where it really has to do with how excited you are. Excitement is tangible. If you're not excited about making a show, it's palpable. You're going to fade out. You're going to stop wanting to edit. Your show notes are going to get a little bit formulaic. Like, it's not going to have that oomph, right? And then you meet people that have, no budgets and they're shoestringing it, but they're like, hey, I'm telling my story and this is how I did it. And we're bootstrapping it and you're along for the ride. Join the community. Here we go. And that excitement really, you want to be part of it. You want to just like contribute to their PayPal. You want to feel like you bought in. So I think that excitement is so valuable, and it's not something we necessarily tangibly add value to, but it really has value. That's
I agree. And I
one.
think the good news, the bad news with podcasting is the barrier to entry is very low, right?
Absolutely.
Anyone
So you get
can
everybody
start a podcast.
and you get anyone. Yes.
And then, as you know, 2021, something like 1 million podcasts started.
Oh, yeah. It
and
was
like
the year.
maybe
2020.
200,000 are left, maybe.
Well, I also think that, when we're in a phase, or when the world was in a phase where we couldn't do a lot of stuff, people really had the opportunity to try things. And podcasting is something that is a great idea always. I have always encouraged people, start that podcast. Like, do it. I'll help you. You'll help them. We'll help you.
Absolutely. Always
And
happy to.
also, it's not that much work. It's actually some work, right? You have to, if you want to position yourself properly, if you want to have all your ducks in a row, if you want to have a launch strategy, if you want your brand to be consistent and, really cohesive and say what you want it to say to the people you want to say it to, that requires some effort consistently.
Yeah, it is work. I mean, there is no
work.
doubt about that. Like, people would say, in fact, my husband, because he sees what goes into this, he's always like, don't dismiss how much time it
You should
takes
charge
you.
more. Yeah, absolutely.
I should charge. Yeah, you know what? Actually, I would say almost all of us should charge more, and that's a whole different story.
We've talked about that here on PodBiz, actually, with a lot of podcast service providers. That flip from first you don't know, then you learn, then people start asking you, then you offer it, then you become an expert. It's really a progression of a lot of people's ability to become independent entrepreneurs. And there is a mindset shift that really happens. Like, oh, actually, my time isn't worth, less than whatever. So I think that's a really important thing as well.
And I share that with a lot of people. I think this whole idea that your podcast, yes, it's a service. Like, a lot of podcasters are like, I'm providing a service. You know what? My doctor provides a service and they charge me every time.
Yes.
So it's this illusion.
And
again,
I'm
because
grateful. Thanks for fitting me in. And I'm happy to pay the bill. Yeah.
Or my husband this morning is like, I'm going to go get new tires on the car. The mechanic is providing a service. Yes. And we're paying them to do so. So I think there's this little bit of a myth maybe, that because it's easy to start. And because
Yeah,
it's mostly personal time, that it perhaps doesn't have value. Or perhaps
absolutely.
because your numbers aren't, most podcasters aren't getting 1 million downloads. I may
Absolutely.
never get 1 million downloads in, I don't know, 50 years of podcasting. Who knows?
Right. But maybe you're getting downloads from people who, cumulatively over the course of your partnership with them will pay you $1 million.
There you go. Absolutely.
I
Absolutely. So
think
I think it's
especially when
that.
you're working with big brands, 100%, it's super clear to get specific on who your show is for. And I think that you really do that well. You've gone out and, you've built something that was needed
Yeah.
within, your niche. I want to say
Yeah.
chemical engineering, but it's really the chemical industry,
Yeah.
right? And when we're talking B2B, right? That's when we're not talking indie dollars anymore. We're talking corporate marketing budgets, right?
Right. Right. Absolutely. So I really compare the chemical show to other trade media in the industry. So
Fabulous. Yes.
and along the way, really from the get-go, I wanted to have sponsors. I had a few sponsors in my first 3 years, and it was really in 2023, end of
Mhm.
2023, a business colleague that he and I kind of hold each other accountable. We were having a
Mhm.
conversation. He said, you need to decide if your podcast is a marketing tool and then treat it that way and give it the time and effort and energy and cost that way. Or if it's a product line and that it's an actual business that you're running. And if it's a business, then you need to be at least earning higher. Well, okay.
Right
And I
out.
and I took that. And so that along with,
Right.
again, back to
Am I
the
here for
stars
a media
aligning.
pass or am I here for cash money? Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And sometimes both, right?
Yeah.
And so I took that, and then along the same time, there was some marketers reaching out to get some guest plays that were like, "What? Like, how much do you charge?" And I'm like, how about sponsor a couple episodes?" I didn't really know. So between January 2024 is probably when I got really serious.
Mm.
I'd always had a media kit. I updated my media kit. I started getting very deliberate about the value equation, what I was charging. And frankly, charging executive interview fees, not necessarily all the time, but absolutely there are businesses that want to and welcome paying those. My comparison back to the whole trade media thing, I'm looking at to have conversations with marketer friends who get interviews placed for their executives and other things. And we talk about, okay, how does this work? I downloaded so many media kits, not just of podcasts. I did download some podcast media kits. They're kind of few and far between, which is actually a problem. That's its own story.
Absolutely. This is a huge thing. I tell podcasts all the time. You need to have a media kit for your show. You
Yeah.
need to talk
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
value. You need to talk about, who you're reaching, not just necessarily through your show, through your newsletter, through your social, what your overall
Absolutely.
impact is and who those people are, what they're buying, what demographics they are, what their education
Absolutely.
levels are, what their ages are. Yeah,
All of
absolutely.
it. I'm completely on board with you. And a lot of times people say, well, I have a one sheet. I'm like, oh my gosh, my media kit is
Yeah.
10 pages, or it varies because
Yeah.
we keep
Yeah.
changing it up. It's between 8 pages, maybe it's 12 pages, it's whatever. But to your point, the value you bring is way more than just downloads. In fact, I do a speech. In fact, I did one this past year at Podfest on beyond downloads,
Yeah.
because the reality is not everybody's listening to your podcast, but they
So
are
true.
getting actively engaged by your social media, by the video clips that you do, by your email messaging. We publish every
It's your brand.
podcast.
It's your
your
brand.
brand.
Absolutely. Yeah, Max
Absolutely.
Cutler talked about this at the London Podcast Show. They stopped calling their shows podcasts and they called them shows because he's like, look, this is
Mm.
across, all these different platforms and verticals and mediums, and that's how we have to market it, for top level professional shows. And I think you're right. There's that divide in between the indie folks who are like, hey, I've got a laptop and a mic and this is my passion project, to people who are like, hey, here's my media kit. This is what this is worth.
Right.
Here's what you're going to get. And I'd love to hear, just on the B2B side, if you don't mind sharing
Yeah.
what some of the value around those packages looks like for sponsors.
All right. So are we talking value in terms of what they get or value in terms of what they
Both.
price? Okay.
Both.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll be candid. I'm at at this point charging $4,500 per episode, per
Yeah.
interview, right?
Yeah.
I charge $4,000 a month for podcast advertising that goes dynamic. We do bespoke other packages where I will go into businesses or conferences and podcast from there.
Yep.
And that starts at $10,000 up.
Yep.
I actually had, I shared with you earlier that I had a call recently with another B2B podcast and who is charging about $11,000. Now,
Absolutely.
I'm going to dial this back and tell you, and I'm very candid about it. I get between audio and YouTube probably 300 to 400 downloads per episode.
But they're chemical people.
They are people that want to listen. They want to hear
Absolutely.
these business leaders. They want to understand their approaches, et cetera. So there's huge value in that.
Absolutely. And I also, just really quickly, I have to say, for everybody who's listening, right, maybe you're on the software side or you're in a different facet of podcasting and you're like, 4,500 for an interview. But when you think about it from a corporate marketing budget, I mean, if they had to come up with that and produce it themselves,
Yeah.
it'd be 4 times the cost.
Exactly.
Easily.
Exactly. And now I will tell
Easily.
you, the sale of this is a little hard because depending on who you're talking to, some
Yeah.
people get it. They're like, oh my gosh, it cost me more than that to produce a
Yes.
video and assets, and you're giving it to me. And other people
Yes.
are like, what? Like, I don't just get to talk to you. And again, it's a mix because, I hold full editorial control. I'm really clear on that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have a guest that I wouldn't otherwise have,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's important to me to
No, you
have
don't want it to be
the
pay to
credibility
play.
of the
Yeah,
show.
absolutely. And we've all had that situation, right? Where you're like reading a magazine and you think you're reading an
Yeah.
article and then it says advertorial and you're like, flip the page.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that pay to play content sometimes can be really
Yeah.
interesting because it changes our perception. And a lot of the time people don't know the difference, especially now with social media and content creators. It's sometimes hard to distinguish what's an ad and what's not. And it's really important to have that distinction and clarity. And so
Well,
I think,
it's
yeah,
interesting. Is it important? So if you listen to talk radio, so let's think about like Paul Harvey, who always incorporated a story about, I don't know, pick a product. Vicks Vapor Rub, you talked about Vicks, right? I don't think at any point in time when we listen to radio, even today, talk radio, when they're integrating a story about how, oh, I always sleep on Boll and Branch sheets and they're the best. And at no point is it sponsored by Boll and Branch. Yes, it's there. It's there in
I
the
think
fine print. It's on
in
the stuff. But
podcasting, it's clear though with host read ads. It's super clear.
that part is absolutely clear. But if you're integrating the story a bit more clearly, which by the way, I think is directionally where we're going to have to go because to get to effectiveness, or frankly, it's probably a higher value sponsorship when you just integrate the conversation.
It's
right? Let's be
interesting. That's a
clear.
bit of a hot take, I think, because I think people want, to know that transparency. And also, I have to say, depending on what company you talk to and who you ask, right? If you're talking about podcasts that get, millions and millions of downloads, and the ad tech on that side, is really advocating for like, let's insert an ad because we can insert it based on geography and demographic and we can tailor that ad, but it's not necessarily the content of the ad isn't necessarily tailored. But I think you're right in terms of, especially where you're coming from on that B2B side, it's really more, instead of even being host read, that next step is really brand ambassador level. And that's, I think, even off the mic, right? Where that person is saying, hey, actually, I'm an ambassador for this brand, not just reading this ad. I think that really is kind of almost next level in terms of, the kind of sponsorship that brands and companies are leaning toward, for sure.
I agree. And I think that I found that actually a really tough space to navigate. Right. So I often will get people that want me to have referral agreements and I want, can you promote my shipping service or can you send like, yeah. But I'm also, I can make no promises. So for me personally, that's actually an interesting area to navigate. Or, hey, we're going to have a cocktail party at a conference. Can we sponsor your cocktail party? Will you come? Will you invite people? Well, yes. And so it's hard. And I know that in the consumer space, influencer marketing is far more sophisticated. I think about, the parties that, they don't do, I'm dating myself, right? But I would say like the parties that Paris Hilton goes to or whatever,
no, absolutely.
where she's getting paid to attend
100%.
that party and promote it.
I mean, celebrities definitely have appearances. It's very interesting. I think, where things are headed, but just kind of circling back, on the offering that you provide. I also think that it's really fun that you guys created a conference. And, I'm always looking at how podcasters are offering value. And it's interesting because I think, we talk about this all the time. We want to make sure it's to say go hard on your niche, because that's definitely something we say here all the time at PodBiz. And also, it's what value can you offer that niche? What kind of products can you promote? But it's also like, what can you offer in terms of community? What kind of community can you curate? And so in terms of curating that community, right, instead of, exclusively saying, okay, we're an online community, like you said, we built it, it's coming along, you're doing many, many things. Yeah.
Maybe too many things, but that's a different story.
You're doing a lot of things. And so you're like, I'm also kind of running and curating this community. I heard you kind of like sprinkle it in. You're like, I'll leave that over here. I'll leave it over there.
Oh, yeah.
And also
because it's hard. Because
so
community building
and
is
so much labor and it's
hard.
so much work. But then it's also like, hey, actually, I'm going to roll this into my sponsorship. Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to, instead of you coming on for an episode, you're going to come on for an episode and you're going to have a booth and we're going to do a featured event at this conference. And so it's something that you could roll into that sponsorship that's not exclusive to digital media.
Absolutely. And in fact, so, what's interesting with the Chemical Summit, it is not a trade show. There are 0 booths.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Because nobody no, it's okay. Because nobody wants a booth. Nobody wants to be blasted.
It's true.
By
people want to speak. They want to be, they want to be thought leaders.
They want to meet people. So it is really an intimate gathering of 100, 150 leaders.
Amazing.
At, round tables, people on stage, in the room. And a big part of my kind of personal values and how it ties to my business is connection, growth, and impact. And so for me, the Chemical Summit is all about creating that connection. So it's both, so the guests that have been on the podcast are the speakers and panelists, or maybe they're in the room. The sponsors.
Yeah, because it's further emphasizing your brand, right?
Yeah,
it's further saying like,
absolutely.
hey, actually, this is our summit and we want some people to be part of it and some people that are part of us and our show and our ethos are going to speak. Absolutely.
Right.
It's like,
absolutely.
We talk a lot about podcasters doing live shows, right? And it's kind of the ultimate equivalent of a live show, especially if you don't have booths. I'm hoping you have merch though.
No merch.
No merch.
No merch. Because again, we used to have merch. Nobody wants merch. People are sick of,
your
especially
niche does not want merch, but some podcasts go hard on merch.
Some podcasts too. I started going hard on merch and we ended up gifting most of it. But as it turns out, people don't like,
I love
really
hats.
dying.
I have to say, you have to pick your thing. Mine is like, if I'm going for a walk in the morning, I'm like, okay, I'm going to wear a hat. Yeah, I'll wear a baseball cap for anybody out there.
Too.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, I know what you mean. And that's definitely very specific to each niche and to each podcast, right? In your audience.
Yeah.
Which is,
well, and I think
important.
It's because I found we go to conferences and everybody has to figure out what tchotchke they're giving away.
Oh,
at their
it's
booth,
so true.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm at the point where I say no, thank you to most things. I might like evaluate it at the booth. Like, what is this?
I'm the same.
This is cool.
I don't need another stress ball. I'm fine.
And then I will say part of it is the this aspect of, I guess it's a bit of the sustainability geek in me. Like,
oh, totally. Yeah, because you get home and you're like, you have all these flyers and you have all these pens that don't work right. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's very, like I said, I don't need another stress ball. The amount of stress balls at any conference in any industry, it's like, I do not want a foam thing with your brand on it. It's not going to reduce my stress. It's going to increase carbon emissions.
20 years ago, I might have enjoyed it. When my kids were little, I brought home tons of stuff because it was cool. Now, I will collect every tin of breath mints that somebody's giving away.
Yeah, see, everybody's got a thing. Mine's hats.
I collect
Yours
breath mints around everywhere. I'm happy to have that. It's useful. I throw it everywhere. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. But I
definitely have picked up some breath mint swag for sure.
Yeah. I think the way, back to kind of what we've been talking about in terms of monetization of podcasts, how do you build a successful podcast brand? How do you successfully monetize your podcast brand? You can't treat it as a standalone entity.
Yes. It has to be a brand.
It is part of your business. It is part of your brand. You create community. You extend it both in terms of how you engage your audience and your community, whether it be audio, video, shorts, LinkedIn, et cetera, but then creating the rest of it, right? So, which in my case is the conference. I also offer a mastermind, chemical executive mastermind. So I've leaned all in, by the way, on this, the chemical show, the chemical sun. Might as well,
I love it, though,
right?
because
what
also, like, your business, Progressio Global, really does leadership consulting for leaders within, the chemical industry. So when you're talking to like a chemical engineer, right? I keep wanting to say biochemical engineer, but I'm not a science girly. So I'll just say,
And I'm going to tell you, I really talk to leaders. A lot of the leaders aren't even engineers, right? So maybe they're
yeah,
there, but this is a leadership podcast
absolutely.
and it's about the business side of things. But
Yeah,
yes, I
but
mean,
your background really speaks to that. So it's a really
yeah,
natural fit, right? And I think it's something
absolutely.
where for everybody out there who has a corporate career and you're like, oh, how could I ever pivot into something I love as much as podcasting? Because, like we said, if you love it, you love it. It's really taking that knowledge and utilizing it in ways that provide value to that industry where you have that expertise. And I think you've done that
Absolutely.
so beautifully.
Thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
Victoria, I want to ask you next, what would you say is one key move or metric or even mindset that's made the biggest impact in your podcasting career and the success of the businesses that you work with to promote their talent and their innovation?
Yeah. For me, it's really that it's not just a podcast. I talk about reach, and this is my thing. Downloads don't count. If somebody asks you your downloads, that is the wrong number, and I never respond. I mean, I might respond, but I
Yeah.
always talk about reach and impact and followers because
Yeah.
it's it's the email list and the email
Oh,
audience
God.
that
Yeah.
gets the knowledge, the nuggets, the links, etc. It's the people that are following the website. It's the people that are on YouTube. It's my LinkedIn. It's the people I engage with. So to me, it's embracing reach and impact and value and kind of not necessarily ignoring the download number, but a little bit ignoring the download number, making sure you're connecting with people where they are.
Absolutely. And like we've been talking about, when you have a B2B podcast, it's very different. B2C is sometimes you're dealing in aggregates, right? But when you're talking
Yeah.
about B2B or a niche show, there may only be 3 to 500 key decision makers in that industry, and 50% of them may listen to your
Yeah.
show. And so I
Yeah.
think it's really important to have perspective about that, and like we say this a lot within podcasting. If you had all those people in one room, right? Wouldn't that be a big deal if you got them to listen to you talk for 40 minutes? So I think
Absolutely.
that, right, exactly. So I think that, it's really important for everybody out there to give themselves credit in that way and to really, focus on who you're giving that value to and what it looks like. It may be a
Yeah.
download, but it also may be, a feature. It may be assets that they can utilize, for their own internal marketing. It may be a feature within your email newsletter that's very well received. It may be thought
Yeah.
leadership. Absolutely.
And I'm gonna challenge you a little bit here because I actually think B2C podcasts are can also be very niche and
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
very valuable, right? So I always
100%.
give this
Mhm.
example, like, if you're a Pilates instructor in
Yeah.
Poughkeepsie and you've got a podcast, right? Who wants to be part of your podcast? Businesses that are in Poughkeepsie, your audience that's there. So I think there is always this opportunity to niche. So, what 5% of the podcasts that are the biggest podcasts are really broad. And the reality is everybody else is not. So
Yeah.
embrace your uniqueness, embrace the niche, look at it and realize, oh yeah, it is just a small segment of the population that wants my podcast, and that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've definitely talked to creators about that. It's really fun, I think, when you find a podcast that also really digs into something that is a special interest of yours. It's definitely very special.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Victoria, what's something that people don't know about what you do?
My gosh. Um, I would like to say I'm an open book, but there's probably a lot of things. One of the things that people don't know, and I'm talking about it more, is that I do a lot of public speaking. In fact, that's really, so taking and harnessing what I know about the industry, the impact I have, and going out and speaking with companies, with conferences and elsewhere. Yeah, that's my business take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you had to start over again today, what would you do differently to grow faster or smarter?
I really think I look at the Acquired podcast. How's that? So I look at Acquired and, I love the story. They're very niche and yet not because they're a big, badass podcast. They were so deliberate in the curation of content and in the curation of sponsors right from day one because they knew it. And I think I would lean in a lot more on that aspect, on really curating my niche, my sponsors, my guests, my topic faster.
Absolutely. The
and
riches
just
and the niches.
and be okay with it. I mean, it
Yeah.
is
That's also
okay
it's also a
with it.
really big that's also, yeah, super important, a really big thing you just said there, because I think a lot of podcasters come in and they think they're too specific and they're afraid to put themselves in a box. I think that that's a really common thing that I
Yeah,
hear from both companies and brands and independent creators. It's
yeah,
definitely a big one. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
I
That's
mean, I
super
think the
valuable.
other piece is I would promote myself more. That is probably my hardest thing is and I have some friends that have been like, you need to be talking about yourself more on the podcast. And I structured my podcast as an energy focused podcast. It's probably 80-20, 80% interviews, 20% solo episodes.
Mhm.
But it's sometimes hard to promote myself, right?
Of
And women
course.
have a harder time promoting themselves than men do. There's a lot of statistics about this, but I also just think each of us in our own way having imposter syndrome, like, "Ooh, I'm talking with the CEO of company X. I'm not as good as that person." They're just people. They're
Yeah,
just people, and you have great
absolutely.
stories, and your story, your narrative, the value you bring is just as important. So I would move much more quickly, even today, to promoting myself more.
I love that. I think that that's such valuable insight for everybody watching. I think it's definitely something where so many people have felt intimidated in an interview, whether they are the interviewer or the interviewee. I also think that in my case, I also feel like there's a little bit of an equalization or a leveling that happens when both people are in front of the mic and you're just having a conversation. And I really like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
Victoria, last question here on Podbiz. What are you most excited about coming up within the podcasting industry?
I am you know what? I'm just excited about growth. I actually think
Yeah.
we're in a period of reinvention, and there is podcasting as a media is still a baby,
Yeah.
right? Newspapers have been around for hundreds of years. Magazines have been around for over 100 years. And somehow we think that podcasting is mature, and it's not. It is
Mm.
still an immature baby. There
Oh,
is so much room for growth. There's so much change taking place. And I think that's really what I'm excited about is being here at the ground floor, continuing to do what I do, but embracing the growth and the change and the development as it comes.
oh, I love that. We talk about this all the time, how people say, "Oh, it's too late. I should have gotten in podcasting in 2017. I should have started a podcast in the pandemic." You know, whatever. And you know, there may be 4 million podcasts, and also I think only 300,000 are actively podcasting. And then you think, okay, what's my niche and who am I reaching?
Yeah.
And then really you're one of maybe a handful, if not the only show who serves the audience that you serve. And so really embodying that spirit of service and being excited about creating things, it's still the time. It's an exciting time. And I think, the next
Yes.
5, 10, 15 years, we're only going to see it grow. And everybody in the
I hope
industry is
so.
like, here we go.
Here I hope so. I hope so. I think it is an exciting time to be part of podcasting.
Absolutely. Well, Victoria King Meyer, president of Progressio Global and host of The Chemicals Show, thank you for joining us here on Podbiz.
Thank you.